Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. This was one of our monthly picks for the Interstellar Book Club and we all really enjoyed it. If you've read this one, let me know what you thought in the comments. I'm going to be doing plot, review, stuff I liked, stuff I didn't like. It will all be marked on the time bar, as usual. Apologies if any of my pronunciations are not spot on. At the borders of the nation of Huaxia, the people have erected an enormous wall, dotted with watchtowers to protect their country from the metal monsters that storm the wall again and again and again. Ace celebrity pilots, always male with their female counterparts, control huge mecha suits, leading them over the wall into battle. It's treated almost like a sport. They protect the people. It's streamed live on TV. They hold sway in government. They endorse products. They do advertising. And boys can hope to attain this lifestyle. Government agencies measure something called spirit pressure in young boys and girls to see who might be able to pilot these immense machines. But the most a girl can hope for is to be a co pilot, to feed her ki, her energy, into the control of a male as a best case scenario, and as a worst case, be drained, used up, and then tossed aside. Zetian, the main character, applies to be one of these concubines in order to assassinate the man who killed her sister. But in the midst of battle, terrifyingly, she ends up draining the ki of the male pilot that she's with, killing him. She is an Iron Widow, a thing purported not to exist and hushed up by the government whenever it arises. A female who can burn through and use male concubines. Something that threatens to tip the foundations of the society that she grew up in and give a voice to hundreds, thousands who are not allowed to object. Points for originality, and straight off the bat, I will say that this world build is not like any other world build that I've read before, which is good. It's refreshing for somebody like me who has been raised on Western and Soviet sci fi almost exclusively to have sci fi fantasy that is very heavily East Asian inspired. There are clear parallels with Chinese culture. There's the defense of a great wall, invading creatures called Hunduns, clearly a reference to Huns. It uses names of actual people from Chinese history and uses imagery that I imagine must be culturally important, but I'm not sure. There was a chrysalis that, for example, that takes the shape of a rabbit holding a giant pestle, which seems like it's probably a fairy tale or a folklore character. The action scenes in this were amazing. I think the author has a real talent for pacing fights and fight sequences very well, with them not feeling chaotic or over busy. A lot of what I enjoyed about this book was how easy it is to read. It's fast paced, it's full of things happening. It felt like everything was an event and there were no lull periods. But this did contribute to something that I wasn't a huge fan of, in that because it was so fast paced, because it was so full, you don't really get a chance to see or appreciate the world build. And the details, the very detailed scenes, were scenes that I wasn't particularly interested in. So I found myself reading very fast to try and get back to the bits that I was excited to read. The book, despite having the background of sci fi and mecha fantasy, focuses almost entirely on the relationships between people. To the point where sometimes the war with the big alien giant robot enemy things seemed like an afterthought in comparison to the amount of detail poured into chapters about media sponsorship, torturing politicians, upturning society through violence. So we didn't really get a good look at the world or the structure of the nation that it's set in. And I get it. I get that we're seeing the world through the eyes of somebody who is thrown into the middle of the action, into a place in society that they don't particularly understand. But I think a lot of the time I was reading this, I was kind of like, bit more of X, bit less of Y, please. With this being a story about nationwide injustice, I think it would have been really good to see more of that nation or more of that injustice. I think this could have been a really excellent story if told from the points of view of a lot of different people at different places in society, rather than just one person whose place in society changes. I think this book has a lot going for it in terms of progressive rep, which is always really nice. And it is the main thing I see this book praised for in reviews. You've got a disabled female POC protagonist, and you've got a love triangle that resolves itself into a functional polyamorous relationship, which is not something that you see a lot. I am always critical of love plots that don't feel necessary, and I feel like without the romance in here, it wouldn't have felt as YA as it did. There were some parts of this book that felt quite YA, and others that really didn't. I think where this book falls down, and the reason that I reviewed my rating of it a while after reading it, was having the revelation that I didn't like the protagonist at all, and they were not a good person. And I know protagonists don't have to be a good person. She does a lot of murder. She murders a woman who is protecting her toddlers. She murders her family, who are literally begging her not to. She crushes an entire palace filled with people. And I think the thing that makes this not feel YA is that in YA, this kind of thing is discussed. It's seen from different angles. People who the bad things are affecting have their point of views out. But here, Zetian does all this insane, horrible stuff, and then the next page is giggly flirty. She tells a politician that she's killed his son, she tortures him for information, and then 2 pages later, she's swooning over her bad boy companion. There's no remorse, there's no guilt, there's no consideration for the innocent people that are caught up in her rampages, because they are rampages. And it makes it very uninteresting that this isn't questioned, and that she is constantly and unrelentingly painted as a hero, despite all these things she's doing. There's so much anger, and it seems as if it's got a message that things need to be not so much solved with violence, but violence is needed to tip the scales. There's also a lot of anger from Zetian towards other women for being so spineless and so cowardly. And several times Zetian talks about her problems and how they all revolve around being a woman. She talks a lot about how much she hates being a woman, which also I don't think is the best message to be thrown around either. Every man is horrible, even the man who had to be drugged and dragged into his chrysalis mecha suit because he didn't want to pilot it. She just really thinks she is the exception, that everybody else in the entire world is an idiot. This 100% should have been a villain origin story, because it would have been an excellent one. I think the only way for me that this series could be redeemed is if in subsequent books her actions are examined, or she does start to feel racked with guilt about all the actually very innocent people she has killed. Maybe she starts to realize that the things she's doing are making her no better than the people that she was trying to oust in the first place. I'd really like it if subsequent books in the series were from the point of view of people who are watching this unfold, who see the Iron Widow rise and start to affect change, and then just go on an indiscriminate murder spree. I think I wasn't super invested in the background characters because it didn't give us a lot in the way of backstories for them. So we didn't really get a proper look at the justification for the things they were doing. But this is a really interesting world build, and the author could do a lot with it. I think I'll be looking at reviews for the next one before I read it to see how much it focuses on alternate POVs, the history of the world, the mechanics of the magic. This is a good book if you want something spicy and original, a little bit raunchy, and a protagonist who, despite all the bad things that they do that you have to gloss over, is compelling and commanding. So thanks for tuning in for this review. It wasn't a rant, I promise. If you want to follow me on Goodreads and Twitter, they're linked down below. If you want to join our Interstellar Sci-Fi Book Club and read and talk about books like this one, you're very welcome. I'll link that down below as well. And I'll see you soon for the next review. Bye.